socially conscious sheltering. Um, a little bit about who I am. My current role at Dumb Friends League is the community liaison. So prior to COVID, I used to be traveling and moving around the state of Colorado, working with specific rural parts of Colorado, rural shelters, rural rescues, organizations within that specific area. Most recently, I've done a lot of work with the San Luis Valley. I think a lot of you may know that Dumb Friends League opened up a satellite location a few months ago in Alamosa. And so I had been doing a lot of work within that community. And I'll be talking a little bit about my experience from a statewide perspective of some of the work that everybody on this call is doing and doing within collaboration with one another. I also, before this particular role, my background is in animal behavior. So the past 14 years, I have been either a part of or managing behavior programs at Dumb Friends League, at Boulder Humane Society, and then also at a shelter in California called East Bay SPCA. So my expertise is in behavior. And so I'm going to be talking a little bit about that and sort of weaving it through as we talk about specific tenets, because behavior is really, really gray, right? We don't have a blood test for to really determine outcomes for animals. And so I will be weaving some of my experience into the conversation through that lens. And then last but not least, that is Sully. That is my 12-and-a-half-year-old Pyrenees lab mix. And he is originally from Humane Society of Boulder. If folks know who Connie Howard is at Foothill, she chose him for me because I could not find the dog, right? And so she finally said, "This is your dog." And so he was originally from Kansas. So this was 12 and a half years ago. We were transferring in from out of state to help support other shelters. So just to give you a little bit about my background. And then also before we get started, I do want to thank HSPPR for having me today and for prioritizing talking about socially conscious animal community and socially conscious sheltering, and for inviting other organizations. So we'll get started. Today's agenda, I'm going to talk about the animal community portion and really talk about what that could look like, who is involved in that. And then I'm going to be talking about the 8 tenets of socially conscious animal sheltering. And I'm going to weave in some common concerns about the framework or some common questions that we get, but there will also be time for Q&A. And that Q&A can either be unmuted and you can ask a question and we can have a conversation, or you can drop questions in the chat. Feel free to drop questions in the chat throughout the presentation. I'll be monitoring that. And if we don't get to it when I'm talking about the current content, I will make sure to address it later. And if you haven't said hello inside the chat, your name, where you're from, we would love to continue to see who is here. So socially conscious animal community is really when we talk about both the community and the 8 tenets of sheltering, I think it's really important for all of us to know sort of how this came about. I'm sure a lot of you know that 4 leaders within our state decided to come together, and it was a response to figure out how can we talk about the work that we're doing. What is the language that we're using? How can we be transparent? How can we highlight some of the challenges of animal welfare and really educate the public on all the nuanced elements of animal welfare? And how can we really, really highlight all of the good things that we're doing? And so that's where this came from. And it has evolved over the course of the past 3 years or so. I remember back when I was behavior manager 2.5 years ago at Dumb Friends League, when they really started to talk about this concept. And it really has sort of grown from this idea and this concept within Colorado all across the country. And so I will like this afternoon, I have a meeting with Seattle Humane Society, really expanding this framework into shelters across the country. So when we think about a socially conscious animal community, we're thinking about all these different types of audiences that really help create a large impact for not only the people in the community, but the animals within the community. And some of these audiences are going to look really familiar to a lot of you. I mean, I see a lot of really amazing organizations on this call that are doing this work currently, and have these relationships with these types of audiences already, which is incredible. So again, just bringing language to the work that you're already doing. So when we think about working outside of our shelter or working outside of our rescue, we think about developing relationships. There's what I like to call the 3 C's. So this framework is inviting folks to be curious. And what I mean by curious is asking questions to stakeholders, asking questions to folks in the community, asking questions to partners, asking questions internally, to make sure that the programs, the procedures, the policy, how we're operating our facility is what the community actually needs and what the community is willing to collaborate with us. So being curious, I mean, that's a lot of what my specific role is, that when I go out into areas of Colorado, I am just trying to get to know what are the pain points in that particular area, where are they really successful, like what are they doing really well, and how can we expand our network and make a larger impact. So constant level of just being curious and always checking and making sure that we're not operating from assumption, that we're actually have the right data. The next C is creativity. And I really, really like this one. However, I think it can sometimes be a little bit more uncomfortable for folks because this framework is not necessarily prescriptive. We're not saying what you can and can't do. And we're not telling you what it should exactly look like, which I think is really different in our industry when we think about like all of the best practice manuals, all the SOPs, all the standard procedures that we really, really want to hold on to. And sheltering has become really, really gray, which is exciting. We're trying all new things. We're taking animals by individual cases. There isn't a matrix anymore, right? But with that comes a little bit of discomfort. And so what one organization in one part of Colorado, how they're expressing socially conscious animal communities or sheltering may look very different than another organization in Colorado because the communities are really different. And why I like this is because it really gives people permission to do what is right for their community and to do what is right for their organization, instead of us all looking the same and trying to do all of the same things. So the last one is collaboration. And you're going to hear me talk about this over and over and over again in this presentation, because collaboration is how we can really expand that impact that we're all wanting to see. And, just in my role, when I have maneuvered throughout the country throughout the state, or I'm on regional calls, the level of collaboration that is in this state is really quite extraordinary. And we're already doing that. And so how can we capitalize on that and actually collaborate even further? So we're going to go through each of these audiences briefly, just to give you an idea as to why they are really critical to a socially conscious animal community. It's usually a mouthful to say. Okay, so the first one is the community. So this is everybody in the sort of your volunteers, your adopters, your donors, just your neighbor, right? How are they involved in developing a socially conscious animal community? Well, they come in, they adopt. They have experiences with our organization. They might volunteer, they might donate, right? We need to connect with them and really try to teach them the complex nature of animal welfare and be transparent with them in order to really strengthen that relationship. Next are policymakers. So we want to be able to develop relationships with the people that are responsible for developing policy. We want to help them understand the challenges within animal welfare. We want to identify like what laws are working, what laws are not working and have unintended poor consequences, and how can we help the organization connect with those policymakers in order to support the animals and the people within their community. Next is media partners, which I know a lot of folks on this call have relationships with media partners. They are the ones that can really spread the word and share the story about what it is that you're doing from a transparent perspective, and really highlight all of the good work, right? We know that this work can be really challenging. It can be overwhelming. It can be like misinformation can get spread. So really having those relationships with media partners can highlight what the work that you're actually doing. So law enforcement, we need to have relationships with folks in law enforcement in order to create a socially conscious animal community. We need a partner to help us identify when there's cruelty and neglect. We need a partner to help educate people, to give them access to resources, education, if they weren't aware of that. And so partnering with law enforcement and developing that relationship is really, really critical, whether you have law enforcement within your organization or whether you have to partner with police department. Down in the San Luis Valley, we've been working down there for the past 3.5 years. And really developed a strong relationship with law enforcement there, and really just sort of educating them on why animal welfare is really important and how that has an impact on public in general. Veterinarians. So I'm not necessarily talking about in-shelter veterinarians, although they are a critical audience for the socially conscious tenants. However, I'm talking about private practice veterinarians, how we develop relationships with them in order to support the animals in our care. That could be for post-adoption support, so animals that are being adopted from us. It can also mean to support the animals inside our facility. Working down in San Luis Valley, we had to develop a lot of relationships with the veterinarians there, and luckily they want to support shelter animals and they understand the intricacies of animal welfare. And so developing those relationships not only support the in-shelter animals, but also the animals within the community post-adoption. The next is rescue groups. So as we all know, no matter how great your facility is, no matter all of the creative solutions that you thought about, building soundproof kennels and all of this, it's still really stressful for our animals to be inside shelters. It's not an ideal environment from a behavior perspective, and then that is going to compromise the animals from a medical perspective or vice versa. So we really want to make partnerships with responsible rescue groups that also prioritize these same tenets, the same philosophy, and really start to see, here is where we are struggling inside our facility. How can we develop relationships with other groups that really thrive in that area? And then lastly, it's the human animal resource providers. So this is sort of an all-encompassing audience that really supports keeping the human animal relationship and bond intact and preventing the animal from coming into the facility to begin with. So many different types of programs and services could encompass this. This could be a partner with like Colorado Pet Food Pantry is an amazing example of how they keep pets together in their homes because they're giving them access to resources. So whether you're partnering with an external organization that is doing amazing work, or whether you are providing these programs and services within your organization. So that can include pet food, like I mentioned, affordable vet care, which we all know is very expensive, and we need a lot of that. Affordable behavior support, grooming and boarding services, humane education, community outreach, TNR programs, and connection to human health care services. So that if we know that somebody is challenging with their pet, are they challenging in their own life, and can we give them access to those resources? So that's the audience, or that's the community filled up of all of these great audiences. Now we're going to move on to socially conscious sheltering, the 8 tenets. And what's important to say about the 8 tenets before I move on is that these 8 tenets are not necessarily a checklist, which again can sometimes be a little uncomfortable. We sort of want things to be really black and white. These 8 tenets, rather think of them as a framework, guiding principles, sort of your stake in the ground. It's what you reflect back to when you are thinking about programs, policy, procedure, right? When you're deciding to change something within your organization, you are saying that you subscribe to these tenets. And it doesn't mean that you have to arrive and complete the tenets. And if you have, amazing. But there are some tenets that we're always going to be striving and leaning into. And so think of it as more of a framework rather than, okay, we need to complete all of these before we can call ourselves a socially conscious shelter. If you call yourself a socially conscious shelter, it means that you believe that these 8 tenets are really important, and you're constantly striving through your behavior, your policy, and your procedure to make that happen. So the first one is ensuring every unwanted or homeless pet has a safe place to go for shelter and care. So just to put this out there, even though DFL is an open admission shelter, that does not mean that this is what we're saying here. We want to make sure that every unwanted homeless pet or unwanted pet has a safe place to go. So how are you doing that? Right? That could be that you're partnering with a foster-based rescue to receive animals off hours. That could be that you're partnering with a 24-hour vet clinic. That could mean that you're open admission. That could mean that you might not necessarily be doing this right now. So you're saying, okay, how can we change that? What do I need to look at for our intake procedure? What do I need to look out for the length of stay of animals in our care? How can we make their stay with us more efficient and move through our system so that we can take in more animals? What does that look like? So asking the question, how can we make sure, and how do we know that we are receiving all of the animals? Is there a large stray population? Do people feel as though they can trust your organization? They can come to you. They won't feel judged. They feel safe, right? So it's really taking a look at this from a holistic perspective. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be open admission, right? So the next tenet, which I never thought would, but I think has had a lot of miscommunication and a lot of misunderstanding around it. And I'm going to hopefully address some of those questions and concerns today. So place every healthy and safe animal. I think this tenet should read, place at least every healthy and safe animal. This tenet, although it's been perceived that it is suggesting this tenet is not suggesting that you can only place healthy and safe animals. This tenet is saying that we should at least place every healthy and safe animal, which I gotta say, and you can disagree with me in the chat, but I think we're doing this in Colorado, right? We're actually in need of animals, which is why we have a robust transfer system coming from out of state. I think where this tenet really applies is maybe in certain shelters and organizations in the South, throughout our country, where they are still heavily overpopulated and they're doing a lot of work to get these animals transferred to other parts of the country that really don't have animals. Like the Northeast is really, they have gotten the overpopulation problem to a good place, but now that they don't have access to animals to adopt. So this particular tenet is really, really talking about placing at least every healthy and safe animal. It's not telling you what you can and cannot place. we did try to define healthy and safe. And I think I'll read the definitions and I'll talk a little bit about this. So healthy is no signs of clinical disease, or if there's evidence of disease, there is a reasonable expectation for a good quality of life. And safe is has not exhibited behavior that is likely to result in bodily injury or death to another animal or person. Now, having like my background is in behavior, as I mentioned earlier, it is so important to use language when we're talking about an animal in with just facts and not assumption, and using really really clear, concise language. And I know that even the words in these definitions need to be defined, right? We can always go sort of a layer deeper in terms of defining words. And so it's really important, again, that this tenet that we're really focusing on, that it's more about making sure that if we have healthy and safe animals that we are euthanizing, that we actually find placement for them, and that we are looking to expand our transfer partners, we're looking to expand our adopters to make sure that we're not euthanizing animals for time or space, right? So again, I really feel strongly that we're achieving this tenet in a really great collaborative way in Colorado. And I don't think we would be able to do it without the robust transfer system that we have currently. Next is assessing the medical and behavioral needs of homeless animals and ensuring these needs are thoughtfully addressed. And this is my favorite, right? Because I've been in behavior in shelters for the past 14 years. And what this tenet is really asking us to do is not necessarily just assess the animal when they come in during intake, not necessarily just assess them maybe during a behavior evaluation or a physical exam, but to be assessing their medical and behavioral needs throughout their entire stay. So how do we do that? How do we educate our volunteers and our staff on what to look for? How do we make sure that we have processes in place to sort of alert whoever needs to know the information to make sure that that animal gets access, right? What does that look like? How do we how do we empower our volunteers to be the eyes and ears to support these animals? So this is about assessing their needs from when they come in, throughout their entire stay, and ongoing as they are with us. Now, for some reason you see this and you say, wow, I mean, this requires a lot of resource. 100% agree with you. It does require resource. There are some where it just requires education, and that when we have that education, we're more empowered to actually get these animals access. However, if you don't necessarily have those resources, there is no harm in transferring the animal to an organization or a partner that has those resources. That is part of assessing the medical and behavioral needs and saying, we might not necessarily have what this animal needs at this time, and we need to transfer it in order for the animal to receive that care. So alleviating suffering and making appropriate euthanasia decisions. So this is one that this is a tenet that I like to talk about, because I don't feel as an industry we're talking about this as much as we should be. And what I mean by that is, how do we develop a productive culture or a productive engagement or conversation around euthanasia? Because making the decisions, caring for the animals, making for the decisions, and then actually performing it is hard enough. And then when we have challenges within our communication, it can be even more challenging, which can lead to fatigue and burnout. And so when I think, having been a person that has to care for the animals, develop behavior protocols, make euthanasia decisions, and sometimes perform euthanasia decisions, I have known that being able to have euthanasia as an outcome can help alleviate suffering, and it can also keep our public safe. And so this is not necessarily the reason why any of us got into animal welfare. This is not something that we enjoy doing. It is really painful and really challenging. And there's ways in which we can take a look at how are we making these decisions? Who are we asking to weigh in? Is that process productive? How are we communicating about it, whether it's internal with staff, whether it's with volunteers, whether it's to the community? How can we be as transparent as possible? And again, how can we cultivate an environment where we've got productive conversations around this? Because again, making these decisions can be really challenging. And again, it's part of the 8 tenets, because we, the folks that believe in socially conscious sheltering, really believe that this is an outcome option. It's not like, sometimes it is the only outcome option for an animal in order to alleviate suffering. So this needs to be part of the 8 tenets. The next one is aligning policy with the needs of the community. And as you heard me talk about before, when we were talking about socially conscious animal community, we are talking about really getting curious and asking questions about what the community needs. Where is the community, like, where are their needs met, and what are the challenges? And I like to share that when we started working in the San Luis Valley, we went down to Alamosa, and we had a stakeholder meeting, and we invited veterinarians in the community. We invited city officials, county officials. We invited all of the shelters there, the cat rescue there. And we as a group sort of facilitated a conversation about, what are you doing really well here? And what are some of the challenges? What are the gaps? And then that afternoon we had, that evening we had a meeting with just community members. And it was so cool to see that 90% of the list matched. So what the stakeholders and what the organizations saw as the need, so did the community. And so that tells me that they are really in touch with what the community needs. They're talking to their community members and being really clear as to where the gaps and the challenges are in Alamosa. So next is enhancing the human-animal bond through thoughtful placements and post-adoption support. And I know that we all try really hard, that the industry has moved from this really restrictive, almost judgmental perspective when we are adopting out animals to this more open adoption policy, where we are trying to get to know the person. We're trying to understand what it is that they are needing. What is their lifestyle? How can we match you with an appropriate animal? And although we try our best in doing that, sometimes those placements don't work out, right? And sometimes those placements from a behavior perspective actually are just not the right fit for both the adopters and the animal. And so receiving that animal back into care in terms of post-adoption support could be the bare bones of post-adoption support, being available to that community member, to that adopter, and saying, yes, we will receive you without judgment. We might ask you questions to better understand what's going on in order to make another thoughtful placement for that animal. So in terms of post-adoption support, that is the bare request of socially conscious sheltering, is that you're receiving that animal back in care. And post-adoption support can range, from that to so many different types of programs, right? It could be wellness, it can be behavior support, medical support, it could be supplies, pet food. So it just depends on what your community needs, and it also depends on what your resources are. And remember, you don't have to build all of these programs from scratch, especially if you have other organizations within your community doing some of this program work. The better option would be to partner. Second to last is considering the health and wellness of each animal and each community when transferring animals between communities. And so again, we've got a robust transfer system in Colorado, and it has probably been one of my favorite things in my career to be a part of a group of people that work so well together and save so many additional lives. Like, it has just been, there's so many organizations on this call, on yesterday's call as well, that have really helped me personally as DFL's community liaison. So when DFL couldn't help, or when it wasn't necessarily our responsibility to help in that particular area, so many organizations have stepped in to really help support rural shelters. And so I want to thank you. I mean, HSPPR has been an integral role in supporting the San Luis Valley. And so it's really been quite amazing to meet so many people in this state wanting to really just make this impact. And so I want to say thank you to that. And I also want to say thank you to the way in which folks step up and become transfer partners in this state. I want to make a real big emphasis on the word partner. It doesn't feel as though people are coming in and just taking the adoptable animals. They're coming in, taking some of those, taking some of the challenging ones, and then also providing additional support, whether that's SOPs, whether that's cleaning protocols, whether that's sending staff members down to help teach that organization how to clean properly. I mean, I've seen people go above and beyond to support animals, not just in their area, not just in their shelter, but throughout this entire state. And so I just want folks to be aware of all that incredible work that is being done. And when it is being done, we are also taking into consideration, how can we keep the animals in our care healthy from a medical perspective, a behavioral perspective, and how can we keep the animals within our community really healthy? So when we're transferring in from, let's say, heartworm areas, right? How can we make sure that we're protecting those animals, the animals in care, and the animals in our community? And then lastly, this is my favorite tenet, that I don't think this work cannot really be done without this particular tenet, because at the end of the day, we have to all work together. And so when we foster a culture of transparency, ethical decision-making, mutual respect, continual learning, and collaboration, we can really make that larger impact. Mutual respect and transparency. From a behavior perspective, I've had a lot of really challenging, hard, vulnerable conversations with organizations that maybe we didn't see eye to eye on something. And I think that having those conversations where I'm maintaining my integrity and I'm maintaining your integrity, and there is respect for one another in the conversation. It's not necessarily an us versus them lens. It is that we are trying the best and we might disagree along the way, but how can we do that in a really productive manner? That really requires us to be self-aware, to notice how we are impacting others, and to really be able to want to work on developing relationships so that we can have that larger impact. So that is socially conscious animal community and socially conscious sheltering. And I think what I'd love to do at this point is I'm going to stop sharing. And I would love if folks want to unmute themselves, come on and ask a question. I would be happy to answer. If you want to drop questions in the chat, you feel more comfortable doing that, that's totally fine as well. But I'd love to be able to answer any questions that folks have in regards to this.
Marissa, this is Eileen at the Colorado Pet Pantry.
Hi, Eileen.
Hi.
Shout out.
Thank you. Yeah, I saw. Thank you. Can you just speak to some of the issues that are coming up and why there's some conflict around this, and kind of talk through some of that stuff? Certainly at Colorado Pet Pantry, we're hearing some issues, and I really don't know what they all are, because I'm not in the sheltering world, but I'd love to just hear what some of the issues are and how you would respond to them.
Yeah, I think there's a few different things. So one issue is I think folks were concerned, I didn't mention this, about the second tenet, place every healthy and safe animal. Some folks in the feral cat community were really concerned about, does that mean we have to start placing feral cats into into homes. And no, that is not the case. We're not saying that you have to place feral cats. That would not probably be a great option for those cats. And so that is one option, or some concern. And that was also in the House Bill 1160. It was in the bill last year. And I think folks were really concerned, like, what does a social, like, what are all of these terms mean? And does that include feral cats? So that was removed. There's also concern about the bill in general, in terms of, like I mentioned, about placing every healthy and safe. And so I think the words healthy and safe have been an emotional trigger for a lot of people, which I totally understand. I totally understand from both the opposing and from the for side, because it can be really concerning, as if we're saying what you can and can't place. And so the bill, in addition to SES, the framework, is not saying what you can and can't place. It has definitions, and that particular tenet, which is why I would love to add in the words at least, place at least every healthy and safe. It's really about making sure that we're not euthanizing healthy and safe animals. It's not saying that you can only place healthy and safe animals. And I think people are really concerned about that language and how it can be misinterpreted. I mean, there's obviously clearly a ton of misunderstanding around it and misinterpretation around it. And so if you're an organization that places more challenging animals behaviorally and medically, which DFL is as well, that can feel really scary, and you want to resist against that. So I think that there has been some challenge around that. And I will say that has been removed from the bill. So we had a long conversation about that. And what was decided is that, since there was so much miscommunication around those words and around what that actually meant, and since we're achieving it in Colorado, we decided to remove that from the bill. And so now the bill is really only asking, it's an ask for some organizations, but it is asking that you're making sure that you are assessing the behavioral and medical needs of animals, so that we do not have a warehousing issue, and we do not have animals suffering in kennels and developing like significant behavior concerns or even medical concerns, because they are spending their life in a kennel environment. So that's what the bill says currently. Again, it doesn't say that if that animal is exhibiting specific behaviors or problematic behaviors, or is experiencing a medical concern, that your option is that you have to euthanize the animal. It's not saying that. It's basically saying that you are committing to assessing those needs and meeting those needs in whatever capacity. So those, to me, feel like the main issues, especially this week, especially last week. And if there's anything that anyone else heard or has any specific questions or a specific issue, I'm happy to answer that as well. But thank you for bringing that up. Did that answer your question, Eileen?
I think so. And I think the other question I have is this bill, is it enforceable, or is it really just like a tag that shelters will be able to put on their name? Or like, what is the purpose of the bill? Is it to actually create a law, or just a statement?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the purpose of the bill is to create a law, and then PACFA would be enforcing this. I don't know all the particulars as to what that would look like, and I can get that information. I still think we're trying to figure all of that out in terms of, what is PACFA looking for? How can PACFA support that organization? How can they connect them to other resources in order to get that animal support? So I don't know exactly what that looks like yet in terms of a program, if you will. But yeah, it would be, PACFA would be the ones visiting shelters and trying to understand what their capacity looks like at that point. It's a good question.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Can you talk a little bit about the impact you've had so far down in the San Luis Valley? Do you have any numbers, or what are some of the successes you've had, and what are some of the challenges, both that you haven't quite, and I know it's early, the challenges you're facing, and maybe some of the challenges that have come up.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I can definitely speak to that because we've been working down there the past few years. So I think that some of the successes that we've had, so I'll start there. Some of the successes that we have had is that the community has been like from the city to the county, from a financial perspective, from an emotional perspective, that has been so open arms to Dumb Friends League, which has just been really, really amazing. Because I think, we were really trying to be careful that we weren't just coming in and taking over. We don't know this community. We're from Metro Denver. This is a rural area. Like, we were really trying to develop relationships. I have some fun. I'm from New Jersey, and rural Colorado is very different from me. And so me being down there talking to veterinarians about all the things, I've a very interesting conversation, and very much a mismatch. And they were just so lovely in terms of educating me about what this community faces. And I think, really taking this perspective that we don't know anything, be curious, and please just educate us on what this community might need. We want to help. Our stakeholders want to help. Was really quite incredible. So that was really amazing. And Dwayne Adams at HSPPR, he and I worked on this project together. And he's done this type of work in his career and was really shocked at the reaction from the city and county officials. So that's a huge success. I also think that, what I noticed there was Valley Humane League, and then we had our staff members be staffed as Dumb Friends League and organize Valley Humane League, and then we transitioned over to the new facility. I think it was really exciting that folks were coming in. We were developing a new relationship with them. There was more owner surrender than there were stray. And this is just my assumption that maybe there was more trust made within the community, that there was fewer animals being picked up and there was more animals being brought in. So I like to assume that, maybe there was a safer environment culturally to come there. And in terms of success, I think that now, Cats Alive has done a lot of really great work down there, but they have been really limited, and their focus has changed and their leadership has changed several times. And so I think I'm so excited that we have a space for cats. And we weren't even open yet, and people were calling us to surrender their cats. And this is the first time that Valley has had a shelter for cats. And really, we're hoping that what we see is, building more of a value on cats, and we're hoping to see that that adoption population grow. Some challenges is that it's 8,000 square miles, and it is really, really big, and there are little tiny towns and pockets that really need support, and a lot of them don't have transportation. And so I could see us expand. We have talked about this from the beginning, expanding transport services, leaving Lulu Mobile down there possibly, bringing some of these services to folks, because we had to pick up some puppies from a location that was like an hour and a half away. This person lived completely off grid. And then there was another situation where we needed to go back out there and get the mom of the puppies. And so, certain things like that where we could really expand. And then I think that we're really unsure about what are the cat numbers. We sort of made up some numbers given what we know about what Cats Alive served, what Cats Alive had to say no to, but we really don't know. And we're seeing cats living inside really challenging situations, hoarding situations, and this is a population of cats that Colorado hasn't really served yet, right? And so HSPPR has been an amazing resource for that. We've got Arc Valley is interested in supporting. CARE is interested in supporting Glenwood Springs. So it's been really lovely to just because it's a DFL shelter, it doesn't mean that we can take all of the cats. And so it's been really lovely to see our partners step in and say, like, yeah, we'd love to help in any capacity that we can. So those are the few things that come to mind. I hope that answered your question.
It does. Have you gotten any pushback from any groups down there?
So there's one group that is not necessarily a fan of Dumb Friends League, and they were part of the initial conversations and are very concerned that we will just euthanize everything, which is not the case. I mean, she's got a very old perspective. And we've made a lot of great strides in relationships with another group in Monte Vista, and they've transferred animals to us. And so we're really building that relationship between the shelter in Monte Vista and the shelter in Alamosa. But yeah, that's the primary resistance that I have heard. But thank you for asking. Any other questions? I feel like can you, oh, okay, yeah. Julie, you got it. It was just a link, a question about sending out the presentation. Any other questions about the framework, the concerns that have come up, feedback?
Marissa, in your work in the Alamosa community, do you see that this is a potential model, and along with the socially conscious community framework, that you can copy and paste into other really under-resourced communities in Colorado? Or, and on top of that, even expanding further, not so much DFL, but using what you've experienced and how you built inroads into that community. And then now you have a shelter, you're starting to serve a population of animals that has never been served before.
Mm-hmm.
Is this, I mean, are you looking at other communities down the road that this might be a potential opportunity to assist even more animals in rural Colorado?
Yeah, I mean, I think it could be a copy and paste approach. I think every community is really different. Just to go on the record, we are not opening up another shelter anywhere right now. And
I'll make you a list.
What places to go? I think our list would probably match, Julie.
Probably.
Yeah, I think that that's the tricky thing about my position, is that, when we go into certain areas, that the copy and paste element of going into an area and getting everybody at the table and having conversations and trying to understand like what they need, what they're doing well, where the challenges are, how can we connect them to resources? Like, Eileen and I were talking the other day about her support for Northeast Colorado. So Northeast Colorado, like near Fort Morgan area, I work with a few organizations up there, and for a long time they were like, can you build a shelter? And we're like, no, we're not in that place to build another shelter right now. But there is, how can we empower folks with education? How can we get people talking to one another? How can we get them connected to folks like Eileen? Now that's going to be a Colorado Pet Food Pantry hub. So, how do we get them access to additional transfer partners? Now they're transfer partners with, Larimer, Boulder, Animal Friends Alliance, Longmont, right? So I think the copy and paste approach of understanding what's going on and what resources they need and are aware of and then are not aware of, I think is definitely a copy and paste approach. But and I think that particular building, that it was designed to be a copy and paste type of shelter. So if that anywhere, not even just Colorado, wanted a really small pop-up shelter, they could use these plans. But yeah, just to go on record, we will not be popping up anything anytime soon. given that we have a lot happening at Dumb Friends League. So yeah, so definitely the approach is the same in terms of how I engage with communities. Great question. Anything else? Well, oh, go ahead, Julie.
What are the next steps for the socially conscious community or sheltering bill?
Yeah, so I think it passed, and now it'll be moved along for, I believe, the mayor to sign. I think that is the next step.
Governor?
The governor, thank you.
Okay.
The governor, thank you.
All right, it passed.
I am government illiterate. So I'm like, where are we at with the bill? Okay, thank you. Yes, for the governor to sign. So it's in a really good place in terms of passing. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, and the next steps for animal welfare, or sorry, for socially conscious animal community and sheltering nationwide is that Allie Michelson, my colleague, and I have been doing a lot of trainings for organizations statewide. I think I had mentioned I'll be meeting with Seattle later today. Really trying to help folks understand what this concept is. A lot of them are like, oh yeah, we were already doing this. Like, okay, great. Thank you for describing a framework that we're already using. And what is next is we just relaunched the website. It's scsheltering.org. And there are a lot of, there's a map of the country to see where, who has subscribed to this. And who is using this framework. And then there's a bunch of resources on there. So we drafted a tenant considerations document. It's about 8 pages long, and it goes through each tenant, and it just has questions for you to ask within your organization, just so that you can have a conversation. It's not crafted to tell you how to do it. It's more crafted to open up a dialogue. So there's that there. We've got handouts for the public on there. So any other resources, we also link to certain best practices in order to execute some of the tenants. So any questions that you have, I would go to the website, or you can email me. I'm going to put my email in the chat, and I'm going to put the website, scshelter.org. Yeah, there as well. So thank you for everyone for attending. Please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions later or concerns, feedback, anything. I'm very open to having a dialogue about from all perspectives, if that makes sense. So thank you so much for being here this morning, and I hope you have a wonderful week.
Thank you, Marissa.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marissa, so much.
Thanks.
Appreciate it. Thanks for your time and all the information.
Thanks, Sean.
Thanks, Marissa.